All right, good morning, everyone. Firstly, I want to start with an acknowledgement of country. For me, acknowledgement of countries, when it comes to myself, I think it's really important to focus on truth telling. I hail from Smithton, far northwest, and it's a region in which we had a massacre at Cape Grim where 40 men, women, and children were pushed off a cliff at gunpoint. Yet it's something that's not really spoken about in my hometown. And it's something that I didn't really even learn about until I moved to Launceston and did my schooling up there. So I think when we are acknowledging the countries on which we are meeting on, it's important to not just acknowledge, but to also recognize what has actually happened on the lands that which we're meeting. So today I'd like to pay my respects specifically to the Tumajina people of Table Cape, the Lorena people of Rocky Cape, the Papaloahina people of Robbins Island, the Penamuka people of Cape Grim, the Pindotee people of Studland Bay, the Pirapa people of Rest Point, the Manajin people of Arthur River, the Tarkina people of Sandy Cape, the Pitanindik people of the mouth of the Plyman River, and finally the Palawa and Pakana people of the Twitter, and the Gadigal and Warrigal people of the Sydney lands, of which UTAS and TUSA operates across Australia. We recognise the history of truth-telling and acknowledge that this land was never ceded, and yeah, we'll make a start into today. So welcome everyone, thank you so much for coming. As you can see, we're kind of a mixture of online, in-person in Launceston, there's even some people up in Burnie as well. You can find the day one schedule on page 4 to see what's going to be happening today. And I'm going to hand straight over to Chris and to Eloise to start the first session of Get Shit Done.
Cool. Are we able to put the slides up on the screen? I might also just provide a quick acknowledgement. I'm sitting right next to Kanamaluka, the Tamar River, and I'm calling in from the Stony Creek Nations. So that is a few different groups in Launceston, including the Lenamarina people.
There you go. Hi everyone, thank you all for coming again to the Student Leaders Conference, day 1. This conference is something that we usually do annually on a larger scale. This year we're running it in-house, and this session is all about just asking questions. It's about demystifying any questions you have, whether you're a new society or whether you've been running for a long time. It's meant to be casual. It's meant to be a Q&A, a discussion thing. If you have any questions, concerns about any of the roles, any of the topics. So for the next 2 days, well, this day, today and tomorrow, we'll be running through different topics, and you'll just feel free to stop us if you have any questions at all about any of them. We'll be running through different ones and breakout rooms, which will show you as well. See in the calendar. So the first one that we are going to go through, something called Get Shit Done. It's basically about AGMs, planning your meetings, doing agendas, doing your minutes, and affiliation and re-affiliation, which is also something you might see coming up, leading up to next year with Club Society Day. So Eloise, I'll get you to just go through the slides, please.
So from our end, we have the actual PowerPoint up, not the share slides. Is that right?
Yeah, so you can see that one.
I can't see what you're pointing at. We've got the actual you can see all the slides and all the presentation notes.
Yes, and we can see her, and we can see her.
Yeah, and we can see you as well.
Okay.
You got to say that into the mic there, Chris.
We can see you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, could you scroll down to the start of my slides then? Unless the shared screen is frozen. Can anyone else online? Yeah, okay, it's right now. All right, could you go back a slide? Cool. So I'm Eloise. I work as the TUSA Board Secretary and as Governance Officer, and this year I ran the events in Launceston. I just want to flag quickly that we are moving offices in Launceston and the removalists are coming, so there is a good chance I'll need to step away for 2 minutes. But really what I'm going to talk to you about is general governance, what you should think about when you're running meetings. And we're also going to talk about affiliation, but that one will be Chris. So to begin with, just so you know, the TUSA website has a lot of resources about running clubs and societies, including particularly the Clubs and Societies Handbook, but we also have specific agenda and minute templates. Just checking, Hobart, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, no issues, okay. Cool. So could I go to the next slide? Cool. So I guess this is a bit of a broad question, but why do we run meetings? Someone wants to.
Why do we run meetings, everyone? Like, in general, does anyone want
To all right, here we go. Update members on new initiatives to get feedback from your group and make decisions.
Anything else?
Richie, about running technical.
Cool. It's a very broad question. I had some ideas myself. So your organisation or your club and society has a strategy or a purpose outlined in your constitution. And meetings are for the purpose of progressing the aims of that constitution. So without meetings, unless you've got, I mean, there are other ways to communicate, but meetings are for gaining agreement on the way that you might progress things towards the aims of your constitution, making sure everyone's on board, communicating effectively, delegating and ensuring accountability through providing actions, and decision making, which is, it's very important that formal decisions and decisions about money, decisions about the way that you run and operate are done at a meeting or through collective agreement. And I think that meetings, when done properly, are very efficient, and when they're done improperly, actively affect the organisation's function negatively. So when we talk about meetings, I think it's also important to think about why you're holding a meeting. Could we go to the next slide? So an example of a type of meeting is a general meeting. So like an annual general meeting, for example. And I guess there's as a club and as a person that's run many clubs, there's your regular meetings that you might meet once a month or once a fortnight to follow up on actions, to provide reports. And then that coalesces at the large annual general meeting where you have to provide formal reports, formal financial minutes, and you usually select the new committee incoming. I guess the annual general meeting has a really clear purpose, but sometimes our regular meetings don't. So it's important to think about why you're running a meeting. What are you hoping to get out of it? So, for example, a lot of the time our meetings at TUSA are thought about in different ways. So sometimes we have meetings that are for informing people. Sometimes we have meetings to hold ourselves accountable and update on actions. Sometimes we have meetings that are more about agreeing and making decisions, like at a board meeting. So when you schedule a meeting, consider, do you need the meeting at all? Or could it be an email? And if you do need the meeting, really figure out what the purpose of the meeting is. That's all I wanted to say about that. Next slide. So meetings are a way to enact governance. Governance is kind of the higher level thing that allows your organisation to function. So you've got operational stuff like running events and even, you know, holding meetings, but the things that guide how you hold meetings or what people's roles are, and, you know, higher level finance, that's governance. Good governance makes your life a lot easier, even as a small society. And thinking about governance from a top-down way makes it easier, even when you're starting your role, to think about what you actually have to do. So maybe go to the next slide. Yeah, so governance for a society, probably the most important thing is that you know your constitution, especially if you're taking over from someone else that has previously worked on a society. The constitution won't necessarily be something you created. So you need to know things like there's details in it about how to run meetings. And importantly, there's role delegations. So the typical roles in a society, you've got your president, your secretary, and your treasurer. You might also have specific roles in your committees that you've created. But there are a few responsibilities that the president and the secretary and the treasurer have that are particularly important and a bit more legally binding. So usually, for example, in meetings, the chair is typically your president. Sometimes you might have a vice president to take over from them, and they chair the meeting. Does anyone have experience chairing? And if they do, what do you think chairing is about?
Getting things on track and just making sure everything's covered and the agendas are all sorted and all kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Herding cats.
Yeah. And online we've got facilitating, conveying information in an orderly manner. Yeah, I agree with everyone. I think that's a key word, facilitating. So generally a chair exists to facilitate a conversation, not necessarily to drive the conversation. Time management matters. If bad chairing can mean the meeting goes 2 hours long instead of 1 hour, which disengages your committee. But I would say that it's not necessarily the chair's or the president's role to drive agenda planning. That's more the secretary. The president is the person that probably sets the agenda largely, and the secretary does the work to make that happen. Definitely, though, I think where possible, a chair should be impartial and have a good idea about the context in which they're talking, so that their society. And it's really good for, in a lot of organisations, we rotate chairs, and that can, particularly in societies, give everyone the experience, which is really important. Anyone want to add anything from TUSA about that? Like Liam?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you mentioned, Eloise, is that facilitation. Your role as chair isn't to be the discussion, it is to facilitate the discussion, and you want to make sure everyone in the room feels safe and available and able to share their opinions. And that's easier said than done. Yes, we work in societies, but power dynamics still exists. And as a president or as the chair is an inherent power dynamic that you have to be aware of. So facilitation and creating an environment that people feel comfortable to disagree with you and to call you out if they think you're wrong is crucial to being a chair.
And it's also about not only your power dynamic, but managing the dynamics between other people. Because, for example, I'm the type of person that would speak up in a board meeting, and that can make other people feel like they can't share. So a chair understands the dynamics in the room as well and works to them. So I think herding cats is quite accurate. Yeah, next slide. So this is about minutes. Minutes vary significantly. So I guess we're talking specifically about what we expect at TUSA as affiliates of TUSA. But largely minutes are to capture really decisions and actions. So that looks like when people put a formal motion forward. So someone might say, we collectively agree that we're going to spend $500 on, I don't know, an event. And then two people, well, the person that raised it and someone else has to agree. And then the majority have to agree with that statement. So someone has to second the motion and then it can be passed. You've got who said what. This is a bit interesting because in general, minute taking at a high level, I wouldn't record what individuals say. I would record committee agreements. So unless someone specifically says, I disagree with this, then you might prompt them by saying, do you want that minuted? But in general, broad discussions don't need to be minute by minute. They can be synthesized into a statement, and that makes it easier for people to go back and read and understand what the conversation was about. If they're too long, people won't read them. Having said that, it depends on the decision. If it's a really, really important decision, then more detail is needed. If it's a minor decision, you just need to reflect the consensus of the conversation. Who is doing what is the actions list. You should always have an actions list, even if you're meeting informally. An actions list records the person, the date that they took on the task, what the task is, and progress of that task largely. That's going to be the driver of outcomes from your meetings alongside decisions. If you don't capture actions, particularly in a student society where you're all time poor, you'll probably find that people don't get things done. And yeah, any other information that was communicated in the meeting. That's particularly true with student societies because you're not going to get 100% attendance at meetings. So it's important that either the communication goes out in the minutes or it's communicated out via email in another way, and that might be more effective. It depends. But you need to make sure that if you're using a meeting as information sharing, that the people that didn't attend are able to access that information. And yeah, so usually the person that does this is the secretary, but in practice, anyone can take minutes. And I'd argue that the secretary's role is more about preparing the meeting than it is about the minute taking itself. So we've kind of talked about this briefly already. You've got your president, secretary, treasurer, and any roles that you might have. Does anyone want to share any specific roles that their club has?
The HMA has a social media person, which is like next to me, so.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, we have a welfare officer because we're plot theatre society. So issues like consent and intimacy are a significant issue for us to consider. So to have someone who is autonomous in their role and can be spoken to privately,
yeah,
is a really great thing to have. And I'd encourage other clubs and societies to consider having a welfare officer as well.
Which society are you, sorry?
Plot theatre society.
Definitely. Yeah, exactly. I guess my question also is, particularly for the older societies, do these roles have defined responsibilities?
Yeah, we do have defined abilities, and they're always expanding. So when we had a chance to do the TUSA run meetings with SAFCU and SAT, it's always to apply, and I think I'm breaking up here, so I'm going to hand back to Mike.
The Law Society also has a Vice President of Education. They manage the year reps and mostly to facilitate liaison between students and the faculty as well as the committee.
Awesome. And where are these where is their responsibility enshrined? Is it in the Constitution or is it somewhere else?
All of our executive roles and most of our other positions are in the Constitution, quite heavily outlined.
Yeah.
But the role itself is mostly about managing the individual year representatives.
Yeah, cool. Right. I guess I just want to lean on that to talk to the kind of newer societies about these kind of roles. When you're starting a society, you might find, oh, Liam's got his hand up. Sorry, Liam.
Sorry, Eloise, I just have one more. My first role in the Environment Society was actually what we called an inter-societies communications officer. So my entire role was literally just relationship building with other societies. And at the time, it was our very first year in existence. So as a new society, we saw that as a very high priority in terms of building relationships with other societies.
Yeah, that's a really, really good role. I guess I kind of want to talk more broadly to junior society, new societies, is that if you're small, you might just need a president, a secretary and a treasurer. It depends what the aims and purposes of your society are. If you're a small hobby society, it might be more appropriate that you have a smaller committee, whereas someone like TULS needs a large committee. And, you know, for example, the Environment Society that Liam is talking about works based, like, part of their efficiency is their cross collaboration with other clubs, so that's integral to them with their it's called like their careers conference, their careers expo. So consider whether you need extra committee members, and I would say that if you do, you don't necessarily need to build it into the constitution, but it's good to have a record somewhere of that role. And you could do that through a different document called the Terms of Reference, or through bylaws or regulations, or honestly, a Word document in your Google Drive, or whatever platform you use. Yeah, so next slide.
Eloise, I just got a question.
Okay.
So when it comes to these executive positions, which positions are usually have a the decision makers, like when it comes to meetings?
So anyone on a board, like, or a committee, is a decision maker. You have an equal vote. Having said that, the president or the chair, it depends on your constitution, but sometimes may not have a deciding vote. So actually they have less power. But they obviously hold a lot of weight as the facilitator of a conversation and the person that drives the agenda. Realistically, your executive, so your president, your secretary and your treasurer, plus your vice president, if you have one, they hold quite a bit of weight in a society because they're usually the people that are really in the thick of the governance and drive the way that the society is going. But actually at a meeting, everyone that's on your committee should have a vote. In saying that, it depends on your constitution and what you define as your committee, because sometimes you might have people at your meetings that aren't actually on committee as such. So it's important to maybe even just chat with Ingrid and understand who is your committee and who has a vote. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I asked because, you know, everyone has different kinds of constitution and the committee roles that are in there. Some might have, say, a socials director who's on the constitution that's defined as part of your executive committee, whereas they're separated. There's some where they're separated as a board and one's just a general committee, but it's usually not followed through as such anymore, like especially if no one's consulted their own constitution during the handover process. So yeah, just check your constitution.
Yeah. Just comes back to knowing your constitution. And also, I mean, yeah, what you want from your society. I will say you've got to consider whether does having a massive amount of people agreeing or disagreeing on particular issues actually impact your society's ability to function. Again, referencing people like TUMS and TULS, they're large enough that it makes sense. But if you're a smaller or hobbyist society, does it make sense for 20 people on the committee to all have a vote on something? So just consider the purpose and function of your society in deciding the way that you operate. Not saying, like, you still have to abide by your constitution, but when you're planning for the future, do you want to consider that is something, you know, just planning. Right, so meeting cycle, this is in broad terms. So this is one way you can do it, but really a secretary kind of gets to define this process a bit, and it can be influenced by the personalities in your committee. So, you know, on different like non-TUSA boards, I've had committee who are unresponsive, and I'm going to need to take a more proactive role as a secretary in those kind of boards, compared to sometimes I might have a general manager that prompts me very quickly. That's great. It makes my life easier, but you often won't have that as a student. So organising the meeting, this we've talked about, we've offered doodle poll. If you are planning irregular meetings, doodle poll can be good, but largely I would highly suggest that you set a meeting date and meet monthly at the same time, particularly after hours if you're a student. I mean, it depends on if you've got placements or not, but try and set a consistent time and you'll find attendance improves. And it might even be better to organise and set the date of the meeting at the previous meeting if you can and get consensus. But if you're doing an irregular meeting for whatever reason, doodle poll is very good. So then the secretary should send out a call for items, prompt people for reports. So different roles might have different reports, take apologies and give people the invite to the link or to the meeting location or online link. Hybrid's usually good, making sure people can access online if possible. And I guess I wouldn't necessarily call for items. It depends on the formality of the meeting. Often your president will set the items, or if it's a recurring regular meeting, you might already have regular items that get reported on. So consider the appropriateness of the graphic. So then you pull together the agenda. The agenda TUSA template's good for that. You just pretty much get rid of all the red text and fill it out with your own information. And then you usually send it out via email, and you might have it stored in a Google folder that everyone can access. And making sure that historic records are maintained is an important role of the secretary. So then at the meeting, you get the chair or the president opening the meeting. Sorry, I'm just reading what Liam's saying. Also, items of other business provide an opportunity to raise unlisted items. Exactly. So within the meeting, there's a chance to raise minor items anyway. So I would argue that smaller calls for items doesn't need to happen. So at the meeting, you open the meeting. Usually there's an acknowledgement of country, and definitely TUSA recommend you do that. And we provide a specific acknowledgement. UTAS have acknowledgements for Hobart, Launceston, Rozelle and Cradle Coast, as well as online. So if you're stuck for who you should be referencing, they have you covered there. So it's important to do a bit of a head count, see who's there, check who are apologies, and note absences. Depends how strict your society is, and the level of commitment expected of your committee, but you might want to track absences just to make sure that people are actually engaging in the society if they're in a role. It depends on the role too. Any questions at this point? So then, you've opened the meeting, you've noted the time you've opened the meeting, and that's important, and as well as the date, but that should already be recorded in the agenda. You've noted absences, noted the people that are there. When you're doing that, it's important that you write people's last name, particularly for AGMs, but in general, it's much better practice to be writing people's last names. These documents don't have to be shared outside of your committee necessarily, with the exception of the AGM, but keeping a formal record of who's there is important, because if someone reads back these minutes in 5 years' time to understand a decision, they need to know who was in the room. So then you go on to previous minutes and matters arising is what we call it, but largely it's going through the actions list from the previous meeting and making a note on anything that's changed, and then moving the minutes from the previous meeting. It's important that you know that only people that were at the previous meeting should be able to move the minutes of the previous meeting. In practice, I don't think many smaller organizations abide by this, but it's good practice. So you should try and make sure that it's people who are kind of regularly at the meetings who move. Then correspondence. You might have received correspondence inwards or outwards. So if TUSA were a society and I emailed the Environment Society something important, I might capture that and call it outgoing correspondence. It's really up to you what level of correspondence you might consider worthwhile putting in the minutes. I think that it really depends on if it affects the governance of the organisation. So if it's about a significant decision, or if it's about a high level thing, or if you want the whole society or the attendees of the meeting to know about that correspondence. But a lot of things don't need to go here. So then you've got your reports that the secretary's previously chased. Strongly recommend that if you've circulated reports on time, maybe a week before the meeting, ideally, and people are expected to read them, then don't waste time reading out everything that you wrote down. It's not efficient. Highlight things. So if there's particular things that you need to debate, communicate, discuss, do that. If there's recommendations or motions you want to make, so that the society spend $500, then that's what you have to talk about, and it should be recorded in your report if possible, but it's okay to raise motions without them being recorded in a report, as long as they are raised, seconded and passed, and that should be in the minutes. So then after reports, you might talk about other general business. It might be about the date of a next event, or other action items and follow up, and other businesses an opportunity, as Liam said, for people to raise other issues they might not have raised before. So it's a more informal way to do that. And then you close the meeting. It's important to talk about the time that you close the meeting, so make sure you record that. And then after the meeting, the secretary writes up the minutes. Here it says, we circulate them via email, and make sure you record them somewhere. Usually an online type of tool is best, though we're talking about, we also need to consider security of those platforms, but you should keep a record. When you're writing up the minutes, or whoever's writing up the minutes, just as a note, try and write in third person. try not to name individuals unless they've asked to be named, like if they've made a statement. Just make it clear the flow of the conversation. It doesn't have to be large, and capturing action items and decisions is most important. And if you can do it straight after the meeting, do it while you remember. That's about it for this. Cool. So we've talked about this a bit, but next slide. Yeah. The two key things that are going to facilitate a short meeting is, well, good planning. You don't want people coming with reports that weren't talked about, that weren't presented in the pack. You want the meeting pack to go out a week before, which requires the secretary to start prompting 2 to 3 weeks before. And then you want the chair to keep people to time and prompt people to move on, and take report as read is very important. The chair needs to know going in what the focus of the meeting is and what items need discussion and what items don't need discussion. So often some reports might just be, I ran these events, they went well, that's great, but it doesn't need discussion. Oh, Liam's got his hand up. Sorry, Liam.
I was just going to say, in terms of taking reports as read, there's nothing more frustrating than going to a meeting where the agenda's been circulated, reports are in the agenda, and then someone reads the report line from line, and you're like, well, you sent me this a week ago, I've already read it. I didn't need you to read it to me. But that also does come with cultures of, if you are going to do the work and put reports and circulate them early, you've got to have a culture in your society that people are actually reading the agenda before the meeting. Because that way, when you get into the meeting, you can just go done, 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 take it as read, because everyone's actually read it. And then the conversation can be much more about discussing any issues or dramas with the reports or anything like that. For people that pre-read agendas, there's nothing more frustrating than going into a meeting and then people reading their reports line from line. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's important because it's about culture. If you presume people have read the minutes and you actually act on that, then people are more likely to have actually read the minutes. But if you don't, then you disengage the people who are engaged. So the next bit is about practicing how to write an agenda.
We're just showing a sample, and then we'll go into
Yep.
a role play just so that you can absorb this a little bit better as well.
Cool. Does anyone else feel comfortable talking to these? Because I think the removalist has just arrived.
So when you're putting your agenda template together, so you're, I think I'd start off by saying that, so you put in your acknowledgement, so first of all, your introductory items there is your acknowledgement of country, and then you put in your present. So that means everybody that's attending the meeting. So so pretty much you can just copy this template that's on our website, and so you don't pre-fill the names in there. So when everybody actually comes into the meeting, you would have a sheet there where people fill in their attendance, their name on an attendance record, and you also have a sheet there for any apologies, and you would also note where anybody has sent in an apology before the meeting via email. You would note those apologies there as well. And also, with absent, anybody that hasn't rocked up to the meeting, that is a member of your meeting, you would just pop in there that they're absent. They just haven't turned up for the meeting at all. They haven't sent you an apology, so they are just totally absent from that meeting. And anybody who is an observer is just anybody who rocks up at the meeting that just wants to come along, attend your meeting and just look at how you do business. So that could just be Joe Blow that rocks up, just wants to see how you run your meeting, just basically sticky beaking in how you do your meeting, really.
They're not voting or anything, they're just observing.
Yeah, and they don't have any voting rights, they don't really have any talking rights, they really are just there to serve. You always have to remember to it's always, one thing I wanted to say before with the chair, it's always got to be the chair's role to make sure that they keep that meeting in line. So, if you did have an observer there that was talking, it's the chair's role to basically pull them into gear, pull anybody into gear that's not meant to be talking at a particular time. So when you get to the minutes and agendas, you get to a minute, so you sort of ask everybody to, it's like Liam said before, you know, you take it that the previous minutes have been read, and you would ask everybody to, if you think that they haven't been read, just give them a moment to read those minutes, and then you just ask, are there any amendments to be made with those minutes? If anybody's noticed anything on those minutes that don't really look accurate from how you remember them from that last meeting, and that's your chance to sort of say, are there any amendments? And then somebody would speak up and say, well, I don't really recall that actually happening in that meeting. So you would bring that up at that point, and then you would then ask for a mover and a seconder then at that time to with matters arising, that sort of relates to those minutes. Was there anything in particular in those minutes that needed attention, that you needed to talk about or resolve? And that's the time that you would bring that up. So with correspondence, with that agenda, that's where if you received any emails notifying you about something, sponsorship, for example, you might have got an email from a sponsor offering you some really great deals for sponsorship, offering you some caps or something like that, really great deal at a pub for counter meals, 10% discount or something if you send your members there. That's where you might put some correspondence in there about that. Outward correspondence would be if your secretary sent a letter out to members just advising them something that was happening in society, notifying them about something that was going on and it was important. But really, it's only the things that you really want noted in there. And you would just put a really brief heading, say for inward correspondence, it might be Dr. Syntax Hotel discount offer membership, and you would just call that Appendix B because your previous minutes would be Appendix A. And any outward correspondence that you had, you would just pile it all together, give each one a little individual heading, and that would be Appendix C. Then, as I said before, it's good practice to submit written reports instead of giving verbal reports, and that's where you would attach them. So the President's report would go there, much better than giving a verbal one. I can tell you firsthand, it's really boring. When you do go to a meeting, you do lose interest. When, we've been given an agenda a week before, we've all read those reports. And when you sit there in a meeting and you've got to have somebody read over those reports again, you really lose interest, And I am one that says, a fast meeting is a good meeting. That is my motto. So written reports given, well in advance so that they can be attached to the agenda is great. Same with the Treasurer's report. It really is really important. There's no excuse that a Treasurer's report and the financials shouldn't, they absolutely have to be attached to an AGM. That is part of being transparent to all your members. Everybody needs to see how your society is tracked for the year and what your current financial position is. It's almost underhand not to present your financials to your members. Every member has a right to know what your financial situation is. That is one of the main reasons for having an AGM apart from elections, is to put your financials on your AGM. So that should always be attached to your AGM, and a Treasurer's report, just something brief about how the year's gone, how you've tracked. And then you also attach any subcommittee and other reports if it's relevant. If you don't have any other reports there, then you just remove the appendix there and you just adjust that lettering. Then, of course, one of the main other points of an AGM is to elect your committee members. So you
So for an agenda, that's where you just put in anyone's nominated themselves, not the official one. You get that minute in after. But also, case in point, something we see very often with meeting minutes for AGMs that we see is that the red descriptions in there are not
Chris.
removed. Oh, right.
I'll just put it up there.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, you can see up here, these are just instructions for you to use, especially if you use our meeting agenda template. Make sure that before you send it out, that you take off any red writing, because we get that a lot, where it's just the full thing that gets sent to us. So,
I'm going to tell you, one of the main things that I always see with affiliation paperwork is quite often the red writing's still there. I often don't see the club and society name written on minutes. That's often left off. And there's nearly always a problem with the appendix lettering. You know, so just keep in mind that orangey red writing really is just there to guide you, nothing else. So take it off. It's just a guide, that's all. Yes, so with the election of committee members, copy in any nominations that you've had, but keep in mind too that at that meeting, you'll probably you have members in there that have every right to nominate while they're in that meeting. So it's probably better to leave that there, and then the chair can let people know in that meeting that you've had other nominations, so then they get minuted. Same with the bank signatories. You can pop them in on the agenda if you wish to. That's a motion ready to go, because you usually know who, well, actually, you probably won't, because you'll be electing your new executive, so maybe leave that blank. With the constitutional amendments, this is where the committee should be talking well before the meeting.
No, you're right.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So with constitutional amendments, the committee would have, prior to the AGM, been talking about any updates that are needed in the constitution. So if there's any name changes or any committee positions that you want to add, then the time to do that is well before the AGM. And then when the agenda goes out, that you attach a draft copy of the constitution with those proposed changes, and that gets added to the constitution with a motion on that agenda, so that all of your members can see that you've got proposed changes for the constitution. And it's good if you can list those changes, or at least make it really, really clear on that constitution what those proposed changes are, so that all of your members can see really clearly what they agreed to change. And if you don't have any constitutional changes, you just remove that.
delete it.
Just delete it. So that really does apply to anything in those minutes. That template really is just there to guide you. So, you know, if any of those parts don't apply, just delete them and just adjust the numbering. If you're going to talk about membership fees, this is a place to do it in there to, it's always good to have a discussion about, do you need to think about, raising your membership fees? Is it working for you? Is your society sustainable? Are you doing okay? So maybe have that discussion in there, see what all your members think. It's the right place to raise that and have that discussion. And then finally, your committee handover, that's just for having that discussion about all the things that your new committee need to know. Your passwords for rubric QPay, any things that you need to know about to grant admin for anything, all of those things that media, cloud data storage, updating ABN, financial things, mainly your passwords and all of that sort of thing. So you can have a bit of a chat about that as well. And then make sure that, if there's any other business, mainly in an AGM, you probably shouldn't discuss other business, because your AGM mainly is called just for the purpose of, your main things like your elections and constitutional changes, bank signatories, that sort of thing. When you want to have meetings for other things, you can just do that in a general meeting. You don't really do it in an AGM. Just call the AGM for those main things that you need to But if there is anything urgent, of course, it just comes in on other business. Other business is basically for anything else that's not listed on your agenda. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and make sure that when you're sending out this agenda for AGMs, that you send it to all the members of your committee. Don't restrict it to just your, executive committee or your general committee, because that could be a point of contention, especially for elections where they say, oh, I didn't receive this, but I can test like I wanted to abstain, or I wanted to go against who was elected after that. So yeah, just make sure when you do this, send it out to every one of your members.
And I think one other thing too is, a lot of clubs and societies will often ask about quorum. And, like it is hard to get quorum. A lot of people don't, a lot of people disappear at the end of the year when it's time to have your AGM. And I'm just going to say, I'm not going to say get around that, because that kind of sounds a bit dodgy, but the way that you do get past that is in your constitution. Most of you would have a clause, and TUSA definitely has a clause that overrides everything in your constitutions anyway. But what happens is you give notice for your AGM, and let's say you're holding it, you get to that meeting and you realise, so the most important thing is you've got to check that you have quorum, enough people to turn up to vote, to make your meeting legitimate, basically. And then you realise, oh God, there's only 5 people that have turned up. We don't have quorum. So what you have to do is you cannot go ahead with that meeting, but your fallback is, in the constitution, is that you just call that meeting the same time the following week, the same time, the same place, basically. And then whoever rocks up at that meeting is your quorum, and your meeting goes ahead with whoever rocks up. And that is your way past to hold a legitimate AGM.
Ask a question like that. Generally, our AGMs are held in January, like the general.
Yeah.
That means we anticipate a lot of the members won't be available for the meeting. And because the agenda goes out a few weeks before, and maybe discuss new members and also new executive members that we believe benefit roles.
Yep.
What we do there is those members that aren't able to attend but would still like to vote, find a proxy.
Yeah.
For someone who would be attending, and they'll vote on their behalf.
Yeah. So is that, like, do you have any allowance for that in your constitution?
No, we don't. But it's just been a practice to ensure that everyone gets the opportunity, because we hold our AGM in January.
Yeah.
And that's a particular, I guess, with our society, is that we need to be up and ready at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And so we've made an allowance for that to ensure that the members are well represented when it comes to the elections of the new executive.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can actually double check that in Robert's rules if you like, and just get back to you on that. But I mean, I'm sure if it's something that you've agreed on in your society, it's kind of, depends if your society's okay with that.
Yeah, I think generally, because the idea is to ensure that everyone gets a say.
Yeah.
Those, ideally, those that are wanting to take on an executive role really need to be there.
Yeah.
For that AGM. And what we usually do immediately afterwards is that if a new president is elected, they chair the general meeting that happens immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
So we hold our general meeting on the same day.
And I am certainly aware that does happen.
Cool, Eloise, finish with that segment.
So we might just jump back to tips, and yeah, whatever Ingrid says goes, because she's the person that looks at your AGM and says whether or not it's legitimate. So Ingrid's words are gospel. So with tips, yeah, you can write on paper, but really you should be minuting online just so that it's accessible for everyone. And I might just note here as well, if you have members of yours, your society who have accessibility issues, you should consider the format that you're using. Like Word documents, usually text readers can read pretty well, but if you provide PDFs, they can't, or they aren't as good. So just consider that. So there's not much to say about this page. So next slide. Oh, yeah, it's important to know, who everyone is, because as we talked about before, you need to reflect who's in the room so that if someone reads it back later, they know who was in the room. You can circulate an attendance list and get everyone to write their names down. It depends on how many people you've got. If it's just a small meeting with 15 people, you can probably just go around and do it yourself. But if it's like a large AGM that you're running in person where you've got 50 students, then yeah, an attendance list that you hand around would be the ideal way, or have it at the door. It's important that you record motions, who moved and seconded them, and it's important that you note that they were passed or if they weren't passed. And you might also want to write passed unanimously if they were. Yeah, and you can write how many for or against, and it depends on the formality of the motion as to whether or not you want to do that. Next slide. Yep, I already said this, but write the minutes as soon as possible if you can. The other thing that I do in my work is I record the meetings so that then I don't need to do that. If you're going to record online, even if it's hybrid and you record it online so you can hear, make sure that everyone knows that it's being recorded and you have consent of everyone. So it's probably good to write it on the agenda that you're going to take from the recording afterwards. Cool. So the only other thing we are going to do in regards to this is a bit of a mock meeting. Chris, do you have the Word document version?
Yep, that's should be so on everyone's workbooks, page 21. There's a complete your agenda. It's got some, we've removed most of the red writing in there. And then also we've got so that the agenda's page 21, but the meeting minutes are page 28. So if we want to go through the minutes one, the blank one, and do the
minutes. But can you send me the Word document so that I can share screen and edit?
Yep.
What we're going to do is we're going to run through a fake meeting. So we're going to make up a pretend society. We can do it with Liam as president and me as secretary, but it would be fun if other people wanted to participate as committee members. Location and the time that I put at the top of the minutes generally isn't the time that the meeting was opened. It's usually the time it was scheduled for. And then you would write meeting opened 10:05 AM if you wanted. So Liam, do you want to chair the meeting?
Cool. All right, welcome everyone to the general meeting of Ingrid's Flamingo Society. We'll start, obviously we've done acknowledgement country earlier, we won't jump back into that early. So to start off with, we'll start who is present. So we've got Chris and the one and only Ingrid here present, Eloise.
One moment.
I'm sure you don't want to write every single person's name.
I'm going to. Okay.
Almost confident that's not how you spell Ingrid's surname.
It is. Oh wait, there was an issue with that's not. Yeah, there.
And apologies, we've got Bronwyn over the back who's currently carrying a hot water cylinder, so she's not part of the meeting right now. And Elias is nowhere to be seen, so he's definitely an absent.
Yep, observers.
Siska can be an observer, sure. Impressive spelling.
Okay.
So in the meeting pack, obviously the minutes from the previous meeting of Ingrid's Flamingo Appreciation Society were circulated. Chris, Ingrid, did you have any amendments to those meeting minutes? No. All right, well, I'll move, as the circulator, I'll move that the minutes were accurate. Would anyone like to second? Ingrid is second, Eloise. Oh, it's an AGM, I don't know.
Oh.
Cool.
It's the document we have. Oh yeah, okay. So just commenting here. So normally we'll say it was November 20th, 2023. So you should always have the date in before the meeting. So this should have been done in the agenda.
Can I just say one thing there too? Always make sure you put in the previous year's AGM, because that is one thing I notice that comes through on rubric QPay, is that when people put in their AGM minutes, they often put in the date of the AGM minutes of the meeting that they're actually holding there and then. And you haven't finished that meeting, you're actually at that meeting. So it's always got to be the AGM minutes of the previous.
And the other one that happens a lot is people will say the last general meeting, not the last annual general meeting. There's a difference. In the AGM minutes, we only care about the last AGM, not the last general meeting. Important to
just as a point here, I would put the item above the motion, because you like, for the agenda, the motion hasn't been moved, but the item, the topic is the annual general minutes. So, because then I can go, so Liam's passed it, Ingrid seconded. Does anyone disagree? No?
Chris does.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay, so passed. Does Chris abstain, or does he say no?
Abstained. He wasn't here at the
Okay.
last meeting, so he's decided to abstain.
Something like that would be fine. It's important that you write passed. Or carried's fine as well. So then matters arising would be your action items. At an AGM, you might not have any, but I would put them at the bottom of the agenda. Liam, do you have any you can make up?
One of the matters arising was that we needed to change the bank signatories from 5 years ago when they were last updated to people that are actually still students. It took us 6 months to hunt them down just so we could change them, which is a nightmare, which every club has experienced, I think.
We could over that.
And Ingrid can confirm that we have.
Oh, I was just going to say, we can override that now, just so that everybody knows. Some of you do send an email just to say, you know, do you need the past bank signatories to sign over the bank account? But trust me, you don't. All you need to do is just put a notice through on QPay just to let us know that you want to change the bank signatories, and we can send you some information to let you know what you need to do to make that happen. But it doesn't matter that your past exec have moved on, we can give you access to the bank account. So that's not a problem.
So in other words, we found a loophole.
Read the handbook, Liam.
Well, yeah, whatever. Then correspondence.
The only inward correspondence was from TUSA that we needed to update our ABNs to be in line with the new recommendations to make sure that we are a charity. Charity?
Working on that.
Yeah, that. So in other words, they won't tax us, which only took us 10 minutes to fix.
Outward correspondence, Neil?
Would outward correspondence be re-affiliation paperwork, Eloise?
Could be, if you want it. But re-affiliation paperwork would include the AGM minutes.
So no outward correspondence?
Yeah, right, Neil. And the other thing here is, like, we've got inward correspondence and Appendix B. Really, the way I would be doing it is I would say this particular TUSA letter is Appendix B, and then you might have a Environment Society letter is Appendix C, because like you might, if you have more than one, because then it's clear to readers what the appendix actually is. And just briefly also, I would hyperlink the appendix with the link if you can.
So just delete the right-hand side of appendixes if you got more appendix, so that way it actually corresponds and lines up with what you got there.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, even despite that, inward correspondence being the appendix isn't good practice. You should say what the correspondence is. So it should be here, and there should be a line, and then you should have TUSA letter. like that. That's all. Let's keep going.
So President's report, I failed to circulate one because I'm a terrible president. I'll have to give a verbal report. Things are going well. We're still appreciating the flamingos. And Ingrid is still our supreme leader.
Yep.
Chris, could you provide a treasurer's report?
Yes, what shall I say of this one? We're tracking well, I would say, yeah. We've raised $1,500 this year in our barbecue, for 5 different barbecues this year. 1,500, sorry, 15,000, wow, dang. To basically donate to the flamingo preservation organization.
And I will say, like, although we are having fun, in an actual AGM or even just general meetings, treasurer's reports are 100% the most important thing that we really should
Exactly.
use verbal report for. Having oversight of your society's finances is probably the most important thing. We are small. It is easy for money to go missing. So making sure that you have that good oversight and transparency to your members is crucial.
Yeah, the two main things we need to do in an AGM.
Report from Chris.
Yeah. But we'll have a segment on the bank fee buck, which is the next segment here, about what are golden rules for treasurers, and like rules that you need to follow when you're delivering treasurer's report as well.
The two main things you need to do in an AGM are pass the minutes. Yeah.
Just give us a second.
Just on the note of the treasurer's support, oh my god, support report, and presidential report and the other reports, are there TUSA documents available for outlining what should pertain in those reports? I'm just thinking along the lines, particularly with the treasurer reports, that should, for example, all recent receipts need to be listed or anything like that? If it's, you've got individual members who are out, spending money for the club, and then the club's just transferring the money back to them, it might not be as easy to or clear to see where that money is going if it's not being spent directly from the society's bank account. Sorry, that was a lot of questions and not very clearly asked. I'm sorry.
That's an Ingrid
Otherwise,
question.
Ingrid.
That's an Ingrid. I think we have balance sheets, don't we, for the treasurers?
There's nothing, there is a treasurer's report template on the website to help you with the treasurer's report, but there's nothing in the way of president's report to sort of guide you. But I don't know, we could have a look if you wanted us something up with some guidelines and just help guide you if you wanted us to. But
the president's report isn't actually as important, in all honesty. It's a narrative report about what's happened in the organization and whether it's moved towards the aims and purposes of the organization. The treasurer's report is more legally binding. You need to actually have your money in order, but the president's report is more of a narrative. So I don't think we could give you a template that would accurately reflect what you might have done.
All right, we've got no other subcommittee or other reports, Eloise, so we can delete that section. Let's go straight down to general business and election of committee members. I've received a nomination from Ron to take over as president for next year, and I'm happy to nominate, and Chris has said that he'll second. Chris has been removed as treasurer after his mismanagement. Ingrid is taking back over. And I'll nominate, and Ron can second. And I will go into the role of secretary. I've nominated myself as secretary with Chris and Ingrid. moving in second. And we are a very small society, so unfortunately we don't have any roles. We just have the very basic 3 minimum roles. Who can move this, Eloise?
But you've already moved all of the positions.
But Ingrid?
We really need more people at the meeting, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, problem.
so to clarify, Ingrid, can any of the people that have been nominated for positions, can they be the mover and seconder of the election?
It's really a conflict of interest to nominate, you know, to vote on yourself.
So ideally you have general committee members that aren't in a position, or in most of our cases, outgoing members that are finishing university and moving on to the next stages of life.
And realistically, we would have more people at that meeting. So really, let's just assume that we do have more people at that meeting. So we'd just be asking everybody else at that meeting if everybody agrees to vote us in.
But that section, you also record who basically abstained or was against.
Yeah, but I said unanimously, so that means everyone said yes.
And Ingrid, if there was multiple nominees for a certain position, what would happen in that circumstance?
So then you would give every person the opportunity to come up and talk about how good they are and what they could offer and why they're the best person for the job. And then what would happen when you get to that voting part is that those people go out of the room while people vote, and you record that vote, and then you ask them to come back in.
So the bank signatories will be Bron, Ingrid, and myself. And Chris has moved it.
Let's pretend we filled it out. We're endorsed as Ingrid's Flamingo Society, passed and by 4 against. Yep.
I do not believe that, is there any constitutional amendments to be tabled? Nothing's been flagged. Our 30-year-old constitution, it hasn't been updated in 30 years, but we're going to leave it as is.
We have membership fees.
And the constitution still refers to TUSA as TUU. But anyway, membership fees, for next year, we're going to set them at $5 for students and $10 for associate members. What's the second blank there for, please?
That's just if you have a different type of solution, but really it's for the most part, it's not relevant. So you can just remove that underline.
Seconded.
And Ingrid second.
Depends when you do your AGM. Okay. And
then finally, committee handover. There is none. Good luck.
Which what tends to happen.
I mean, this would mainly occur out of session, right? So you'd have action items. So like action, Chris to discuss previous balance sheet with Ellen McCarran.
It would be also the president and secretary working together to submit reaffiliation paperwork.
Who was it?
Going and changing bank signatories at the bank.
Yeah.
ABN update.
ABN update, you know, like that's the sort of things that could be there. But more than anything, it's there as a reminder to remind people to talk about handover. I think a lot of us are taking over things where we haven't been handed over, and that is not a fun experience for anyone. And we'll call the meeting closed at 10:36. No other items of business have been raised. And the date of the next, surely we don't need a date of the next meeting on the AGM.
We normally just say like the month. I would like maybe say November 2025, maybe.
Yep, perfect. And the meeting is closed. I just need a gavel.
And I would probably also have an action items list. Yeah, with the things I've recorded.
Can I just bring up one thing, just to put on everybody's radar, just with your AGMs coming up, that there are a few societies that have their constitutions haven't been updated, I'm going to say, for 20 years, and there are a few societies there. Some societies still are using TUU in their name. So if that does apply to your society, can you think about updating your constitution at your AGM? And just remember that you can use the name TUSA, or you can use Tasmanian with an N, University, blah, 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 society. So just keep that on your radar to update. Thanks.
Yeah, I hope it's okay to ask. But with regards to Roselle, because most of it is fast tracked, the people who come in probably won't have seen the AGM minute, wouldn't have been at the AGM previously. So how could we know whether to amend the minutes?
So this issue happens with TUSA as well, because the president, currently the AGM membership is the chancellor of the university and the president normally changes every year, except Liam's addicted to TUSA, but normally it changes every year. So what we do, or what I've been doing, is I ask the previous president to approve the minutes.
Okay, awesome. And who can move and who can second? Is that just anyone on the committee? It doesn't like matter if it's the president or whatnot?
Yeah, anyone can do that.
Cool, thank you.
So we're now in the segment for affiliation and re-affiliation. So I'm sure all of you have already been, or you already belong to an existing society already, but just to quickly go through some steps to create a new club or society. So first step really, whether you're new or whether like a newly created society or an existing one, is that creating a new club or society, you have to define the first step, which is what sort of society you're trying to create. You're finding your four current students who share your interests, and you select your committee. So that there's those different 4 steps, but all of that resource you can find on our website via the CNS online resource and documents. Maybe you want to go to this. So step 1 really is about defining what you're trying to create. You know, we want TUSA won't consider affiliating any new club or society whose objectives are essentially the same as an already existing society. So make sure that it's essentially really different in your especially when you're trying to create your objectives. Otherwise, we wouldn't go through with that affiliation step. Step 2 really is about finding 4 other current UTAS students who share your interests. So that means it's yourself, who's a current student, plus 4 other ones. It needs to be a minimum of 5 to be able to go through the next step, which is basically, finding that one. And then you now select your committee, who you want to be the president, who you want to be the secretary, and who you want to be the treasurer.
The big 3.
Essentially minimum 3, like the 3. And yeah, all of them have to be students. And then you meet with us basically. That's usually Ingrid, who you might contact first. And I'm also sort of the backup. I don't have a Mo in there, no I do, but it'll be gone. Yeah. Next step, going. And then, of course, the next step is once you've met up with Ingrid and she's looked at your paperwork and you emailed her about it and she's happy with it, then you complete the paperwork through rubric. You send all those information through. That includes your completed memberships list. Make sure you include all the student IDs, degree, and essentially any information in they can download the template in that same form. If you're joining us on the QPay rubric session later this afternoon, we'll take you through specifics on how to go through that. But yeah, and essentially completing those tables in there, so, you know, like what your location. Oh, next slide, please. And then after that, you meet up. Once all of that's been submitted, you then run your IGM, where you basically complete. There's an IGM template on the website, quite similar to the AGM templates that you might find there, with a slight bit of modification. And basically, you just elect your executive committees officially. And then after that, you lodge that paperwork in there again. Okay, yeah. The next slot. And then once everything is complete, constitution is complete, then Ingrid accepts that. Accepts that, and then that gets lodged through and added on to State Council's meeting agenda. So State Council, they're basically the affiliation request. They're basically your elected members every year. And once they've considered your affiliation, then we will let you know the outcome. And then that's when after they've accepted, that's when you officially become society, like a recognized society.
And it's just worth saying with that, 99% of affiliations that go to State Council get approved, because by the time they're coming to us, they've been looked at. It's very rare that we'll be turning it down. And if we are declining it, is just to make a minor amendment or two. Usually Chris and Ingrid are pretty good at their jobs at weeding out things before they get to us.
Yeah, so quite similar to the exercise that we did. It's usually either because you're missing student IDs or you're not putting in surnames of people that come to that IGM. So we would consider that as an unacceptable meeting minutes. And so we were like, okay, could you please, we'll reject it. It goes back to your pool. A lot of people forget that when we reject it, it doesn't mean we reject it. It means on the QPace like rubric system, it gives you the chance to then amend, like edit the actual form, and then you have to resubmit it again. Don't leave it sitting in there. Please submit it again, and just ask us if you have any difficulties with navigating that. And then after that, once we've emailed you and say, okay, well, congratulations, you've been you're officially a society. It's now time to set up your bank account and your ABN. There's a PDF there for how to set up an ABN. Part of that requirement is basically putting us as an authorized contact. We're not signatories on that bank account. We're just authorized. So that way, if we're receiving a correspondence, we're able to look at that as well. And yeah, slightly later on, like with how shall I say this? Like currently what's happening with ATO stuff, there's some bits to navigate with that as well. But essentially, basically, it's consulting us to then sign off your A153 form along with your minutes.
And we've got paperwork there that can help you navigate all of that. Got some documents there that with dot points to help you answer all of those questions. So it's not too hard. It looks daunting, but honestly, it's not. And if you do have a problem with going through the Commonwealth Bank, there's other options as well. So
yeah,
you just let us know and we can talk about that. And also, as a new society, if you get your new society approved, there's a lovely $250 startup grant to run your first event to get new members. So, you know, if you guys are thinking about starting up a society, I'd say go for it. Come and have a chat to us.
Cool. Yep. And then after that, of course, once you've set up your ABN, which has that PDF that we send you through of how to create, like how to step by step create an ABN for TUSA clubs and societies, and also your bank. Next things, of course, to think about are your website and logo. Now, the website and logo normally you already should have that created before you submit the affiliation paperwork. So on rubric, the affiliation/reaffiliation form. There's a slot there to upload your logo and 4 other photos. Those photos plus the logo go into our website, which is basically your own club's special page that we edit from time to time if you ever have requests. Yeah.
My club's previous photos and a previous time still hasn't been updated, and as you just answered, it's only edited based upon request, or is it edited yearly as the website may get updated?
It's usually by request. So you have to email us new photos, or if we have ones, like for example, for Clubs and Societies Day, you want photos of, you know, from Clubs and Societies Day put on yours, just let us know. We'll update those. Yeah. And then essentially, this is the same similar step with reaffiliating a society. It's just you skip all the steps about creating a bank, as you already got those, or this step is essentially just running your AGM. Most of you established societies would have probably already run an AGM or planning to run an AGM next year before before Clubs and Societies Day. So if for any reason you're struggling to meet quorum, or you're struggling to find nominees for your club, and you think that the upcoming Clubs and Societies Day next year might be better to find new members, you do have until the 31st of March every year to lodge your affiliation, because after the 31st of March, your affiliation with us expires, so you know, access to.
And on the other side of things, if you are super organized and you've already had your AGM, you don't have to wait till the 1st of January to resubmit your reaffiliation paperwork. If you have it ready, just do it now. You don't have to worry about it. And then you're already all sorted for the next 12 months from March as well.
Yeah. And we'll also go through this with day 2 with our Bolden Fund, but basically risk assessments also have the same deadline with that when it comes to blanket approvals when you run your activities every year. When you have a blanket one, it also expires in the same day. And so that's basically what it looks like on QPay. Is on your own society's poll, you just lodge it through forms. It's changed a little bit from previous years, but they've now made it a little bit smaller. So your affiliation and reaffiliation form, whether you're a new society or whether you're an existing society that want to affiliate with us, they fill in exactly the same form. So you just click that one. And yeah, that's pretty much, yeah, we finishing off. Yeah, that's fine. We could do you have any, does anyone have any questions with this step by step, or? Yep, Jeffrey.
G'day. We started a new club in September. Does that mean we have to do another AGM in March? Will that hold us through all the way to the end of next year?
No, you will have to resubmit your reaffiliation paperwork, but you can just attach your AGM, and you may have an updated membership list. So,
any other questions with affiliating next year AGMs?
I'd probably just like to say, just keep in mind when you do your reaffiliation committee form on rubric, just make sure Chris and I are pretty anal on making sure that it's.
She hasn't asked you. Okay, now she's. I have a question, Ingrid. It's Snehi from the Postgraduate Gallery Society. In rubric over the year, our society has, as you know, is affiliated. However, in rubric, it often comes up as not being affiliated. We keep getting a message to say that we're not affiliated. And currently at this point in time, we got a message the other day when I went into rubric that again, we are not affiliated, and I have no idea what is going on.
So this one is, I would say it's a rubric issue.
Yes, I know, but it's extremely frustrating because you can't get in contact with them and they don't basically listen.
Yeah, apologies for that. Currently it's an ongoing conversation with them because it's a new, essentially it used to be very simple where you're either affiliated for 2024 or 2025, like they just indicated, but the whole time, regardless of whether you were already, whether you lodged your affiliation in previous years, it will just say that you're affiliated. But now they've integrated this two-step system where it disaffiliates you on the system, and then we have to change that. But yeah,
It disaffiliates us at whim. You know, it's like Rubik just decides one day to wake itself up and de-affiliates you, which is incredibly frustrating.
yeah, and that's something it's an ongoing conversation, say for that one. So yeah, but officially you are affiliated if you've already lodged it and we've already ticked on it. We do also have our secret list of sorts, where we indicate which society is actually affiliated, even if they're showing up as affiliated. But it is admittedly, unfortunately, a software issue.
So we can basically ignore that little note.
Yes, yeah, it doesn't prevent you from putting up ticketed events. You'll show up regardless of whether it says you're affiliated or unaffiliated.
Right. Thank you very much, Chris. That's good to know.
Yeah, no worries. Any other questions from the room or
one.
online?
Jack.
Yeah, just briefly, how does it work? Say two people one person seconds, one person moves, but how does it work is it like a 50% thing where you need another, like say there are 10 people, you have the two people that move in second. Does that mean you need another 4 people to agree with it? And then I'm just a bit confused about how, like, what's the percentage to get it passed, to get things passed?
So in terms of, are you referring to the election of like a president and such, Jack?
Just any motions that want to get passed or any elections. I don't know whether they're different.
So in terms of a motion being moved and seconded, the moving and seconding that's prior to it being voted on. So you need a mover and a seconder for it to even be considered by the committee. If you don't, because obviously that's proving that 2 people think it's valuable. And then once it's been moved and seconded, then you'll call, does anyone have any concerns with this motion? Does anyone have any abstentions? And then like that becomes your vote. So you do the moving and seconding first, and then you call a vote on that motion itself. So essentially, yeah, the moving, that's why, as you saw with Eloise, she would say it moved, seconded, and then she would put on the line below, she would say passed unanimously or passed 3 against 1 or such like that. The moving and seconding is it's to prevent essentially nonsense topics being discussed by the committee and wasting the committee's time if only one member of the committee believes it of value.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm just wondering, if through the philosophy we have people who are interested in becoming an executive, how do we change that after we've already had made? Is that possible?
Yes. So Ingrid, you might answer that one.
Sorry.
You mean when you didn't fill those positions at the AGM? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so if it's an executive member, you would have to call a special general meeting just for that purpose to elect the members, so that all of your members get an opportunity to vote that member in. But if it's just a general committee member, then it's something that your committee could just do through a committee meeting. Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions in the room or online? It's ready.
It looks like it's ready.
Yeah, cool.
Sorry, Chris, can I just say, so what I was going to say before about the affiliation form was just to make sure that when you do get to that point where you are going to fill in your affiliation form on Rubik, just to make sure that you do fill in all areas on that committee form, because we will knock back your affiliation if you don't fill in every area on that form. So just make sure you do fill that in correctly.
It's essentially our official record, so it has to be, you know, to a point. Yeah. Cool. I guess we finished slightly 15 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes early. Yeah.
Because we've got morning tea.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, please enjoy a morning tea. We've got some urns there with some coffee. Next up, we've got our bang for your buck coming back here, starting at quarter past. So yeah, cool.
All right, let's talk about winning free money. Is that a fair way to start it for us?
Yep.
Okay, so first things first, just to flag, I mean, so across today and tomorrow. So tomorrow afternoon in the, I think it's the 3 o'clock slot. You'll see on the schedule a thing called Shark Tank. And essentially we've got, how much money do we have to give away, Bron?
I think it's 3,000.
Yeah. So we've got about 3,000 to give away to clubs and essentially you're going to be invited to give little 30-second elevator pitches as to why you should have up to 500, up to even 1,000.
Depending.
If it's a really good idea, we may give you 1,000, but up to $500 on a new event initiative that you want to take away. Kind of no strings attached. You don't have to submit any forms. So over today and tomorrow, just keep that in the back of your mind as we're talking through things like grants, as we're talking through things like event planning and such like that. There's an opportunity tomorrow to kind of put that elevator pitch to us and to be able to win some free money. So grants. Chris, can you jump to the next slide, please?
Yep.
All right. I don't have much to add to this slide. It's pretty much the same as what we've been seeing all day. All this stuff's in our handbook. The handbook is Ingrid and Ron and Chris have spent countless hours over the last few years developing the handbook. It is the Bible for anyone that has a CNS in terms of what to do, what to operate, any questions. Generally, if you come to Ingrid and Chris with a question, they'll probably say, have you checked the handbook first? It has a lot of FAQs. It's everything you need. Just jump to the next slide, please. So applying for grants. So this table on page 54 of our workbook is the grant process flowchart. And it kind of talks about thinking through whether you should apply for grant, whether it's eligible, and which grants you should be asking for. So first off, obviously, is your society re-affiliated? If you haven't submitted your re-affiliation paperwork after March 31st, and you ask us for money after March, obviously we're not going to give you any money. Next things will be planning your budget for your year, review the grant information and cutoff dates on the TUSA website. As you can see in the workbook, the grant cutoff dates for next year are already on page 55. And then identifying an event, activity or purchase which requires funding assistance, i.e. grants. So the grant requests must fall under one of the following categories. So it's worth noting that a lot of these category amounts have actually changed. So capital, firstly, you got capital, and as you would, if for those that were involved in clubs and societies this year, we actually did a special round reminding clubs and societies that you can ask for money for capital, where we kind of did a 10,000 flash grants round for clubs and societies to think about, okay, what capital assets don't we have right now? Do we have square readers? Do we have, what were some of the other crazy things? Do we have boom boxes? What were some of the other crazy things, Bron?
First aid kits.
First aid kits was a popular one. Mind you, I was amazed when one of the dance societies asked for a snake bite kit.
And other things that are relevant to your society. So like the tennis club put in for a ball machine. So anything specific to what it is that your club actually delivers and does.
But the biggest thing to always remember with that is for assets over $50, Ingrid, you'll then turn around and ask clubs and societies to make sure you keep track of those assets on your assets register.
Well, we do ask that all assets that you get are put on your asset register because they do belong to your club and they're not to become personal items.
Yes, because we all know of instances of club members maybe taking advantage of club assets rather than them being purely for the club. So looking across the different grants, just to off the top of the, so in terms of the new caps that are coming at the last grants meeting, so in terms of activity grants, the cap, the maximum amount has gone from 1,000 to 1,500 for 2025. there's been no change to the food, no change to decorations, no change to advertising. Live music and bands is capped at $400. Security is going up to 75% of security costs, which for those societies that are holding events with security, I think will be a welcome news for you. Balls and annual dinners, the cap is going up to $1,500 for next year. Noting that it's not just free money within that $1,500, they all have to be sackable items. So things
like venue hire, a hire of any equipment such as AV equipment. Within that would also fall, within that cap is included your security and your any entertainment like DJ band. So it's all capped at 1,500 complete, but all this a dance floor under equipment hire. The things we won't cover are alcohol and food for balls and dinners.
And it's worth noting with things like events and activities, sometimes societies have huge, big ideas, be it Malaysian Night Market, be NG Laneway, be NG Spectrum, where like the money gets out of the realms of 1,500. It's not a hard limit. It can be negotiated. If you come on and talk to us well in advance, these are the sort of things that take 6-12 months of planning. So those limits, if you do have big ideas, no idea is too big and crazy, don't see the caps as hard limits that you need to stop your creativity at.
Aim high.
Aim high, that's for sure. And so travel and accommodation for, especially for conferences and such, is going from $250 a head up to $350 a head, and up to $600 a head for international. So the cap for domestic travel is $1,400 across 4 people, and the cap for international is up to $1,200 for 2 people. So for those societies that are attending national conferences, international conferences, sporting events, sort of you name it, it's kind of there. Is there any other, and obviously the startup grants is going to increase from $150 to $250. Is there anything else to add there?
No.
Awesome. So as you can see, I mean, I often say, you have a question? Yeah, go for it.
I wonder if this connection was good. Oh, we're okay. In terms of annual dinners, what are the parameters about how many you can have per semester or per year? Is there a number on that you can have write-offs or anything like that? 1. Lovely. Also, if we happen to
It's the term annual.
I like that. That's a great term. Also, if we have a bunch of musicians in our own club, and in terms of hiring ourselves out, are we allowed to do that or no?
Executive committee members can't be paid through things like that, but we do encourage you to use students, and they can be like just general members of your club, but executive committee members can't get kickbacks, obviously, from that because your role is a voluntary role.
Yeah, and for situations like that, it's important to have things like invoices and such in place.
Yes, you do have to have invoices, and if your suppliers don't have an ABN, they then have to fill out a statement by supplier. So those are the guidelines that we have. So every expense that you have with any of the grants, you have to supply an invoice, tax invoice or receipt, or some other form of documentation like a statement by supplier. Well, that's up to you, but we have a limit of how much we'll pay. So we'll give you like maximum maybe $400, and then it's up to you how you divvy that out. So you might have expenses of 1,000, but of that we'll only pay 400, but you still have to supply us with the receipt of 1,000. Yep.
Just to clarify there, is it an invoice or receipt?
Yeah, so tax invoice or receipt. So a receipt's already been paid. Yeah. We can't accept quotes because the idea is that you pay the funds and then we reimburse you. But if it's a large expense, you can always ask us to pay it on your behalf. So then we've already paid it.
So that's a workaround.
It's
So
also,
it's also just staying in conversation with us about how we can help you and support you.
and for those large sums, getting us to pay for you, it's also a good way to get around GST and drops your cost by 10%.
Yeah, because we can claim GST, but you guys can't because you're not registered for GST.
I have a question. Is it still the quota is still 51% of currently enrolled students to be eligible for a grant?
Correct. Yeah, you have to have 51 student members, 51% student members in your society. And you also have to have a max amount of your executive committee members. There has to be a maximum students as opposed to associate members.
So with that, so a bit of background of where TUSA's funding comes from and where clubs and societies grants come from. We all pay these annoying things at the start of every semester called SAT fees, which are up to $300 a year, I think, for each of us. And so we receive about 25% of that to helping fund what we do, which doesn't cover everything that we do, but it certainly covers our clubs and societies grants fund. So SAT fees are directly student money. It's coming directly from enrolled students. So that's why we have things like the 51% rule, because we don't want to be using student money to then fund generic public events. That's why we're really big on 51% membership, is because we're using students' money and we don't think it's right to then turn around to use that same student money to fund events for people that aren't students.
And another one along those lines is you have to have a minimum of 10 members in your club or society. Student members.
On the note of members, and that 51%, they, I'm going to guess, need to be active members. Yeah.
Current UTAS student members. Doesn't matter how active they are in your society. No.
I was going to say, we're not going to go hunting down to make sure they've attended one event throughout the year. We don't have that sort of time. Similarly, with things like student numbers, when we're doing re-affiliation and stuff, if you have 10 students with the same student number of quadruple zero, obviously that's not that believable. So things like that, it's the same thing. All right, so to go through the different categories, so yeah, capital is often the one that gets forgotten. Clubs and societies are oftentimes, even executive can sometimes dig into their own money to kind of buy things for clubs and societies. But we do have, like you are able to ask for money from us to pay for these things. So yes, this year we kind of did a big round to encourage clubs to do that. But don't forget it as you're going throughout the year. If there things come up that your clubs and society needs, come have a chat to us. We can kind of talk you through what can and cannot be. Obviously, it's within reason. If societies are asking for if the tennis club's asking for a $25,000 tennis ball machine, obviously, when we only have $130,000 of clubs and societies grant money in the first place, we're not going to do things like that. So it's all within reason. Activity events, we kind of spoke through there pretty well. It's up to $1,500 for next year. Again, the more conversations you have with Ron, with Ingrid, with Chris, if you look at this flow chart and stuff, once you get the hang of it with clubs and societies, the main thing that stops a lot of clubs from asking for money is the process. But once you do it once, you get used to it and it gets pretty easily. And then all of a sudden you realize it's actually really easy to ask for money for the events that you're doing every other week and to keep things going. Maintenance is another section. So helping to support the upkeep of equipment that is integral for the club and society's aims. Ingrid, Brian, do you have any examples of that? Well, that could be servicing equipment. Yeah, if you had
Go back to that tennis ball machine. If you needed to service the tennis ball machine. Another one is like bikes for the Hobart Bike Polo. They have bikes and they get those serviced. Yeah. So yeah, general upkeep of your equipment.
Sorry, go on.
We need two students. You and
I. Just another question in regards to what grants can be used for. So we have capital. So we've got set pieces, boxes that we can use to reconfigure as set pieces for performances. One of the issues we have with that is storage. can something like, storage hire place be used, grants be used for storage hire?
No, I'm gonna say no, because we
Ingrid-
have
Ingrid's
storage
got-
available. Hang on a
Ingrid's got
sec.
thoughts.
You can come and talk to us. We do have a storage area up at Linda Grove at Mount Nelson, and we could probably offer you a little bit of storage up there, but it just depends on how big space you need. But contact me and see if we could accommodate.
Don Sesson, do you have a question?
We like.
No, they're muted again. I'll take that as a no.
Yeah,
the next thing-
we have question.
Right.
Yes, we, the Postgraduate Gallery Society, we have all our easels and boxes for the gallery. And we desperately need somewhere to store.
A storage place.
We've just moved into new premises at Inverness, so there may be a little bit of storage there, but the best thing to do would be to talk to Colette about what's available up there. But sometimes bits and pieces become available on campus. Like we have a little cupboard just over here that the Mountaineering Club use, so you just never know what's going to come up.
Yes, it's not a particularly large amount, but in my house, which is really small, it's very cluttering, and because I'm visually impaired, it does cause a problem for me. We've got 12 easels, which are all sort of ziplocked together, and we've got 2 black boxes, which is and the banner, and that's it at the moment. But it's very difficult for me to manage them in my place. So I just would like to see if we can move it down to maybe the railway cottage. It'd be great.
Yeah, so send an email to clubs, just so that it's almost in our minds. And we'll have a scout around and see what we can find. We do prefer that that clubs and societies store their items on campus rather than at their personal dwellings, because then it's easier. If you've got it at home, it's probably easier for it to just sort of slip into your own personal items. So it's good to have that definition between what's yours and what's the club's. So we do prefer that you keep it on campus, and we will help you find those places for you.
Thank you very much.
And that kind of comes back to it overall is, yeah, that ongoing conversation. If it's an ongoing conversation with us, we can work with you to try find alternative options. And then usually if all the other options are worn out, that's when we tend to lean back into the grants money and things like that. It's an ongoing conversation to work all these things throughout. So next up, conference travel, as we spoke about earlier, the new caps is up to $1,400 for domestic, $1,200 for international. So just worth keeping in mind. I know for instance, Law Society went away to domestic conferences this year, as did the Malaysian Society and a few others. So those sorts of big things, sometimes we think we can get caught in our Tasmanian bubble and think there's only things happening here. But if there are different national conferences that you want to send people to, those sorts of things do exist. And the big events, so that kind of comes back into what we were talking about earlier with Laneway, with Malaysian Night Market, with some of the other big society events. That's where we say big events, and that's where we, it's discretionary. We work with societies. If societies have awesome ideas, we want to work with you to make them happen. So that's why we have that category there to work with you on. World Health and Safety. So, I mean, adventure clubs, especially for us, oftentimes things like risk assessments, obviously, sometimes our risk assessment process can drive us all insane. But if you're a club that has ongoing risk issues that require spending actual costs on, we actually tend to help and work with those clubs to pay for those things. Obviously, we're not going to expect the clubs to pay for it out of their own pocket. Yes.
Just on that note about ongoing risks and TUSA being able to help fund for that. I'm not sure about any other clubs that might potentially have this ongoing risk, but as a club that is very lucky to have a dedicated physical space that is ever evolving and changing, new risks are coming up rather frequently, and I've had to update my risk assessment about 5 or so times, and
based off of what we were previously going through, that only needed to be put through to the AGM once a year. And with the updating of risk assessments, new safety measures need to be put in place. So how often are we supposed to be like putting through new risk assessments to you guys and asking for new help or more help with trying to keep things safe?
It's a question for Chris, that one is.
Yeah.
Chris does pretty much 95% of TUSA's risk assessments.
So to confirm, is that the UTAS risk assessment, not the TUSA one? TUSA one. So with that one, really, it's we do have some general like risk mitigation measures that we implement, like that we write up in there that should cover a lot of it. But if there's any new ones, it's you just have to let us know, and then we normally add that in as a category, or we discuss it, whether as a verbal correspondence or whether it's a written correspondence, and then we send it back to you with the new like signature and the new date as well. It's usually just a conversation like between the event organizers and ourselves. Yeah. And if it helps as well, there's some clubs who use they use a checklist like before they start the activity, which is basically like a summed up version of the risk mitigation measures that they're supposed to use. It's kind of like it meets your duty with care or your process. That's one way to easily meet those requirements. Yeah.
And it's pretty cool to have a basketball team show up to your event anyway. So on page 55, as you can see all the application dates for next year. But what it's worth flagging is CNS Day obviously happens before all this and all the CNS days across Tassie. So next year, what we're actually going to be announcing over the summer is, and as part of the expression of interest forms for Clubs and Societies Day, is that there's going to be a $150 grant for CNS Day activities. So in other words, that's to be held purely on creating an interactive event. So things like food, beverages, merch or promotional material won't be covered, but things, I mean, Ron, is that pretty well covered?
Yeah, so any materials, anything that you can think of that you're going to need to run an activity on the day. So like, say if you want to pot plants, you need to buy the soil, pots, whatever. You can apply for the grant for this. Yes, but anything that you would use as a promotional item that would come with your membership deals, we won't cover those, and we won't cover food and beverages, as Liam said. Or prizes. We won't cover prizes either because that's actually not funded under staff. Yeah, fun things to attract people to your stall and just make the day.
Obviously, across all three campuses, we operate the events in quite huge spaces. So we're keen to get more and more clubs actually not just standing behind the stall and waiting for students to come talk to you, but to get out and to actually interact with the students and encourage students to come to you.
Also, if you attend more than one of the Clubs and Societies Day, so if you go to Hobart and Launceston, you can get that grant for $150 for each location that you go to.
And similarly for Clubs and Societies traveling between campuses, there will be travel grants. The amounts haven't been finalised yet, but there will be ability to be able to get travel grants to go between campuses for Launceston and Burnie and Hobart. The clubs travelling down or going up, either way. That cover that one pretty well?
Yeah, so that can cover accommodation and fuel or travel costs, bus fare, whatever you decide to do. Yeah. But it will be capped. Yeah.
And the biggest thing about that, obviously, it wouldn't be nice having to spend all that money as a society, but then not finding out to the 18th of March as to whether you're successful. So those for CNS Day, for travel and for events, that will all be done by email between you and, I mean, it'll most likely be Bron. So you will know if you get the money or not before you spend it. So you don't have to go spend the money and then essentially be out $150 without knowing if you're going to get the money back.
Correct.
So yeah, those dates are always, there's always a little bit of flexibility. There's always a little bit of emailing going on backwards and forwards. So just reach out to us pretty much all year round, except for now. Because for those that haven't submitted their grant claims yet, they close Friday, Bron.
Yes, Friday, we're losing money. Unless you've spoken to me about it before, or you have events that are actually held after Friday. Again, just talk to me.
So as I mentioned earlier, obviously, Clubs and Societies grants comes through SAF funding. SAF funding is federally legislated, and the government actually tells us, they give us a later list of 18 things that it is allowed to be spent on. That's not a word, spent on. And I mean, the biggest, by far, the biggest no-no in terms of when it comes to spending on SAF is alcohol. So we are never going to be buying new alcohol with SAF money or with Clubs and Societies grants money, unfortunately. That will always have to come out of Clubs and Societies' own costs. But other things will be supplying food and beverages for AGMs. Similarly with balls, we don't do food for balls, considering we're already covering security, entertainment, decorations, venue hire. We think it's fair enough that students pay for their own food.
Yeah, you have to allow for that in the pricing of your tickets to those events.
Things like prizes is also a big no-no under SAF legislation. Yeah, so you can't spend it on prizes for individual club and society events. Gambling, of course, the government says no to that. Gifts, tobacco, yeah, you kind of see all these things all the way down. Any other big no-nos, Ingrid, from?
That pretty much covers it. Just the gifts one, just I know that if people have so run an event where you have someone come and talk to people, we can't cover it if you want to give them a gift. That's what that gift comes into. So gifts for speakers or those sorts of things, anybody that helps you with your events.
Yep. Or souvenirs as well.
Or souvenirs.
Yeah.
And another big one for a lot of clubs, I mean, like the academic clubs, we do inter-college sport, like I know law, engineering, who else does? A couple of the other clubs get involved as well, and they get uniforms for those events. We will help clubs with uniforms, but as soon as you personalize it, then we can't, because the idea is it has to be, they have to be property of the club and not personal. So obviously if you doing HMA do football, if you were doing football and then all of a sudden you put everyone's names on the back of it, that's when obviously we can't fund it, because the students are just going to take those jumpers home because no one else can really use them. So if you're going to do sports and different events and stuff, obviously as soon as it becomes personalized, then it becomes non-sackable, non-fundable. Anything else? Already gone through this.
Okay, so how the grant committee assess the grant application. So the best thing you can do is put as much information as you can in that grant application without meaning that I have to read pages and pages of words. The budget is a big thing. You really need to put in and try and estimate whatever you're going to spend on all the things, because we'll get in there and we'll have a look at that budget, and that will be the basis on what we decide on how much money we're going to give you. So make that as clear as possible. So we need to know any income that you're getting from that activity or any other external funding that you may have got or be expecting. And whatever items you are going to need to spend money on, you have that all listed out clearly and realistically. Be realistic, but at the same time, in being realistic, aim high. So, you know, we can always, you know, bring it down, but I don't know, I think aim for the sky a bit. We'll look at it and go, yeah, nah. And we'll yeah, break it down a bit more. Yes, so we won't fund activities held in private homes. So it needs to be a venue, a venue or on campus, basically. Let's bring it up there.
One of the things in terms of venue hire, in terms of covering venue hire, if you're getting your venue to do your invoices, get them to itemize it so we can pick and choose things. If they just block everything together and it's including food and stuff, then all of a sudden we can't do it. So get them to include details and to separate it out for you so we can actually
Yeah.
chip in where we can.
So if they're covering, if they're providing security, the dance floor, the actual hire of the venue itself, some people will roll that into the cost of the food and beverage. But it really helps us if we can see exactly how much you're spending on venue hikes, so then we know how much we can give you, because we will look at them and we will pick and choose and try and get that to add up to the grant cap we can give you.
I think the biggest thing for grant committee meetings, I've sat on them for 2 years now. We generally go through every application and look for as much money we can give you as possible. We go through the grant, we go through the budget, we go through the invoices. We're like, okay, we can SAF fund this, 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 and this. A lot of the time we're trying to give clubs more money than they've been asked for. It's where we're not giving clubs the full amount is where there's just not enough SAFable things within the items.
Yeah, you haven't clearly shown what we can actually give you money for. We really want to give you money. We really, really want to give you money and support your events to be, yeah, as big as and good as they can be, and help you keep and attract your members to your clubs.
And the other big thing before money is ever paid out is risk assessments. Chris.
Yes.
We're going to do our risk
Yeah, we'll do that next.
There is a risk assessment session, but for every activity you hold, activity or event, you have to have a risk assessment. So that is one of the criteria of being eligible for the funding. So I'll go through, when I'm doing the agenda, I'll go through in this, I'll tick off all the criteria for the grant committee to know whether you've actually submitted an event application and a risk assessment for that event, whether it's in progress and whether it's been approved or not approved, and that will affect whether you get the funds or not.
Plus the 51%.
We've read that.
Yeah.
Plus all those other criteria that we talked to before.
And gold coin, like financial sustainability.
What's that?
The gold coin, like making sure that they're at least.
Oh, yeah, we encourage you to like, not make every event a free event. So we do encourage, we want to see you be financially sustainable within your society. So that comes in with your membership fees that you charge. And also, if you don't think you can charge an amount for a ticket price for your event or activity, at least put out a box or something where people can contribute a gold coin donation at the minimum. So just some sort of ask. So that shows us that you're trying to be financially sustainable and not just relying on grants.
Really just
So as we spoke about before, the grant committee dates, which you can find in the handbook.
Examples. Oh, sorry.
It's a grant example.
Yeah, it's like just like grant example.
Yeah, so in your handbook, there's just an example of a good grant application. So yeah, nice and simple. The ask is clear. They've given us everything we need. I mean, it's a pretty basic one and it's a simple event, but we couldn't just, it's easy. It was a good one. And again, the budget is clear, told us everything we need to know. So there's no backwards and forwardsing that I have to do before I can take that grant application to the committee. If I need to come back at you and ask you any questions, that's just going to slow down the process and your application might not make it to that grant meeting. If I have to come back and ask you questions, or if the committee has questions and we can't approve it at the meeting, that's just going to slow the process down. So again, if you're filling out the grant application and you're stuck, or you've got any questions, please reach out to me and I can help you.
Finding events, and then we go through like a QP.
Heaps of time.
Good.
Yeah.
Heaps of time. So claiming grants. I don't know anything about it.
Okay, this is my goodness. So claiming your grants. I can't remember what's in, that's a pretty big
Flow chart. Yeah.
So it's on page 64.
Let me have, so I get it right.
One thing while Ron's finding that, if there's any clubs and societies in here that want a TUSA branded banner before the end of the year, can you just shoot clubs an email and let me know if you think that you could, get a logo and some stuff together. We can probably get you a banner before the end of the year with a little bit of money that we've got left in our grant banner fund. So yeah, shoot me an email and I'll send you out some information. We can probably get one in time for Clubs and Societies Day. You'd have to act quick on it.
Okay, so for the grant claim, firstly and foremostly, you have to have had a grant application be approved, and it will be approved in QPay. So keep an eye on QPay. So I'll do everything through QPay. Once it's gone through the meeting and been approved, I'll then go into QPay and send out all the grant outcomes of whether it's been approved or rejected. If it's been rejected, I'll try and give you some reasons why. I'll always attach a copy of the grant minutes relating to your grant. So you'll see an attachment in there. Go in and have a look at that, and there may be conditions on whether how you can get the money. So yeah, just always look at that attachment to get all the information you need about your grant. So once you've got that, you can put in your grant claim. So you have to have purchased all your items first. You have to have held your event. We won't, unless at the end of the year now, but generally you have to have held your event or activity before you can claim it. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of them mainly being that if you cancel the event and we've given you the money already, we then need to try and chase you for the money. And also you have to provide all your receipts and invoices in order to get the money. And sometimes that's not available before the event. Okay, so everything's done through QPay. You'll find a link in your handbook of where to get to the grant claim form.
Make sure that when you're going through after you submit your application, the grant application form and everything's events happen, make sure that the receipts that you have actually line up with money that you've asked for in the first place. Because a lot of times there's some things that Ron can't approve simply because it wasn't there in the first place in your application.
So that comes back to making sure that when you put in your grant application that you've listed everything that you think you're going to spend money on. Because if you say you have an activity or an event and you don't apply for decorations, but in the end you end up buying decorations, if that's not within the grant approval, I can't pay that to you because that expense hasn't been approved within the grant process or within the grant cap that we've put in there, say for like the $1,500. So it all crucially comes back to your application to have everything in there, because once you submit your grant claim, I go back to the grant application of what has actually been approved and what I can pay you. So something within QPay that's a little quirky is that when you upload a file for your receipts, you can only upload one file. So a couple things you can do is you have to combine them all into a PDF or within an Excel document or a Word document, but you can only upload one file. But again, if you find out that you're getting strikes and you haven't uploaded everything, you can flick me an email and just email them directly to me. Or to the club's email, it's better actually. And that goes for budget. In each spot, you can only upload one file. Does anyone have any questions? I think it's relatively straightforward what you need to do, but then I'm at the other end, so it seems straightforward to me.
I know that the University of Tasmania makes their own caps and stuff and gives them out at events. Is there a certain supplier they use so we can get in contact with something?
Not if you want to pay an arm and a leg.
Can't write that
UTAS
off.
supply is very, very expensive. Do we have recommended suppliers at the moment for merch?
That's a shout.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things obviously keeping in mind is like the procurement process of your merch for the clubs and societies that are doing merch and whether it's ethical and like where it's coming from and everything like that. It's, I think, I mean, obviously some members care more about it, but I think generally as a university, I think we should care about it. Things like modern slavery, ethical procurement and everything. Obviously that comes with extra costs, but in terms of recommended suppliers, I don't think we currently have recommended suppliers.
Maybe it's something.
It's a good shout.
But also too, on that, within the grants, you can't claim anything for that within grants. That's not covered. That's to come out of your membership fees and things like that, yeah? Cool.
Unless it's a uniform. Can the uniform be claimed front?
Not uniforms for like executive members, things to like for your society. If it's a sports team or things like that, yeah. Yeah. Well then, yeah, it's fine. As long as it's not this ones.
I was just going to say on the note of merchandise, I have actually got contact of a local supplier that does embroidery. I'd need to contact a former member who's got all the contact details, but if anyone is looking for a local, relatively ethical supplier, I do have some information. But also do not disregard making your own merchandise. Our club made our own merchandise for the first time this year, and everything was done by us, so we could ensure that everything was ethically sourced because we sourced it all ourselves. And it turned out absolutely fantastic, and the costs of it were very, very minimal compared to outsourcing as well.
One thing that might be worth doing is we've got a badge press as well that we brought for our club, but it might be nice having like a repository of people who are willing to share their resources with other clubs, societies to make merchandise potentially.
Yep, so within the last CAP grant round, we did that. There was a few people asked for badge making machines. Yeah, cool. Back to the claims, there was another bit of information that I remembered. As soon as you've bought your items or as soon as your event has been held, get your claim in. I will come to a point after a few rounds have been held of the claim of the application rounds, and I haven't heard back from you. I will start imposing timelines of when you can get those claims in, and then when you'll start losing the money because the money will go back in the pot. So yeah, like a revolving pot. If you don't need the funds, then it goes back in for someone else to use it. And also, if you're going to underclaim, like if we've given you $1,500 cap and you've only used 1,000. The sooner you can let us know that, the better. The $500 can go back in for someone else to use.
And that's probably one of the most outstanding things as someone that sits on the grants committee is how many clubs forget to claim their grants. It's like you've done all the work to get the money. It's sitting there. You've just got to request it. And that's the amount of clubs that just forget to do that final step of actually claiming the money at the final stage is outstanding.
And also, if you find that you actually don't want that grant anymore, let us know. So again, that can be used for someone else, because we get to the end of the year and we have all this money that we're trying to give back to you guys.
And I think that's the biggest point of this session today is we want you guys to ask us for more money. We have $130,000 there. We never get asked enough. Clubs are under asking us, so ask us for more money. Right, like there's a lot of these events and things that you're running. And we're going to do a little bit of an activity in a second around it that you could be getting more grants for, and clubs are just not asking the question. This sounds like Launceston may have a question.
Yes, the question was relating to the comments that went back before you and Bron were talking, and the person mentioned the fact that they had done the ethically sourced merchandise. And the question that I wanted to ask was based around that in Rubric, can we actually put up the merchandise that we have, or does it have to be, because when I tried to put the merchandise, for example, the artwork that we have, I was unable to do that. And so I was wondering if the person that had got the ethically sourced merchandise, if they'd actually put it through the merch store in Rubric.
Answer is coming. So the supplier that we have actually haven't been to finalize putting order to them specifically. But the merchandise that we have sold this year was the merchandise that we've actually produced ourselves. And that was put on through QPay Rubric. However, the vast majority of our sales were in person, so I can't speak too much to the online process. However, it was really good having our merchandise up for people to see, because we had a couple of people come to us and say, hey, saw this on Rubric, love to purchase one of these guys from you.
Well, that's great to hear, because then I go back, because it was when it was on QPay and we couldn't seem to do anything. When I tried to put it down, it said, oh, it doesn't matter what it said anyway. But now I will try in Rubric and see if we can put some of our artwork up. But thank you very much for that information.
And that's probably a good point as well, because obviously QPay has charges and stuff for selling merch. Even using it just as a catalog and then getting students to either order separately through social media or doing it in person, so you can avoid those fees. could also be a good thing to do as well, to keep in mind. Cool. So on page 58, we do have a grant application form from QPay. QPay, our favourite thing that we all love dealing with through clubs and societies. So tomorrow afternoon, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing the Shark Tank thing. So we've got a bit of time now that we're going to kind of give you guys to start brainstorming around. It could be initiatives that happened this year that you guys didn't ask for money for, and you're like, well, looking at this flowchart, we should have been asking for this and this and this. Or for next year, new initiatives that you want. What could you ask for money for? Start getting your brain thinking so you can come steal our money for next year. So if you guys want to like chat within the room, online, we'll mute so you guys can chat online as well. And we'll turn off your output so we can't hear you either.